Hi, I'm Peter Tragos, host of the Lawyer You Know podcast and YouTube channel. The saying goes, everyone hates lawyers until you need one. Well, I'm here when you need one to answer your questions and give you insight that you didn't know you needed. Along with my partners, Pete Sardis, the professor, who has a finance and business background, and George Tragos, my dad, and the consigliere, a criminal defense giant, we can answer any questions you have. What's up, everybody? Thanks for all of you that could come in and join this last minute live here during lunch. I don't have a full hour for the video today, so I'll get through as much as I can with this Trevor Summers trial here in the Tampa Bay area. And as always, if there's enough interest, we'll continue to do follow-up videos here. I'm going to give a brief background of the case, and then I'm really going to focus on him being a pro se defendant and cross-examining the potential victim in the case, which is his ex-wife and his two children, one of whom is still a minor, who were there the day of the alleged events. So if you're interested in this case, please take a second, like the video, subscribe to our page, and let me know in the comments section so that I can continue to put time into this, because it did take a lot of time to try to listen to all this testimony. It's kind of hours of testimony I've condensed and listened to over the last, day and a half here. So if you all are interested in that, which a lot of you came to prior videos and were interested, so you let me know, and that is great. I have a packed day today because at 2 o'clock we already planned our top 10 legal TV shows. We'll be doing that video with the members only chat there. I have had multiple calls today. It seems like it's just one of those days. A couple calls from YouTube and people that found me on YouTube, one of which I wasn't even able to take because there's so many of them. Dave spoke to them, and we are going to be able to help them out. So if you ever do need actual legal help with an injury case, car accident, slip and fall, things like that, that's what we do at my firm. We represent injured victims. So feel free to call me wherever you are, and if I can help you, I will help you. If I can't, I will try to connect you with someone who will. Today has just been an absolutely crazy case. But speaking of crazy, I said today's been a crazy case, a crazy day. Speaking of crazy cases, let's get to Trevor Summers, Florida v. Trevor Summers. So he is charged with attempted murder, grand theft, kidnapping, and child neglect. And the kind of background of the case and general story of the case is he and his wife were going through a messy divorce. They have 5 children, ages toddler to 15, I think. And the wife starts, using dating apps and dating other people. They get angry. Fights happen. They accuse each other of different things. They end up coming to the marital settle agreement at the middle to end of February in 2017. And this incident that he was arrested for, now being tried for, happened early March of 2017. So about 5 years old. And we'll talk about why it's so old and why all the continuances. But that night in March, I believe it was March 11th, he is texting with his 14-year-old daughter who is at the wife's house. Wife goes to sleep with the younger children. The 14-year-old daughter lets him in the house. The state's opening statement basically laid out, and some of the witnesses, that these are the facts. Okay, so these aren't the proven facts. But he goes there, grabs the wife, the kids leave, and they are there with him abusing her and trying to suffocate her with a pillow and beating her. And SA, if you remember what that stands for from our Johnny Depp's discussion, he says it was consensual. She says it was not. They're there for a few hours. Then they leave in her car, and her car is kind of the subject of the grand theft. They didn't charge him with any sexual crimes, which was interesting. But the attempted murder goes to the pillow suffocating, and then another incident later, the grand theft goes to him taking her car and her cash that they use over the next 3 days, where he kidnapped her, tied her up, put her in the car. They drove to Anna Marie Island and to Ruskin and to Apollo Beach and all over the place. It's interesting to hear all of these places that are literally in our backyard being discussed in a criminal case like this. And the child neglect charges stem from the fact that they left their kids alone, and he had his 14-year-old daughter and I believe son, who was even younger, drive his car with all of the kids from the mom's house where the mom and dad were to his house about 25 minutes away. And that's, obvious child neglect charges for that. Couple of so first we'll talk about why it's been 5 years. So in this trial, he has a lawyer that is a court-appointed lawyer, not a public defender, and that lawyer does opening statements. He's there for a little bit of the time, and then right after his ex-wife finishes testifying, he fires that lawyer. And the judge explains that in 2017 till now, this defendant, Trevor Summers, has hired 2 private lawyers on his own who have quit, 2 public defenders who have either quit or been fired, and now a separate court-appointed lawyer, which is like conflict counsel, or a private lawyer that is on a list that can be court-appointed for criminal cases. So he's not a public defender. He was appointed, and he has tried to withdraw and has been fired and ping-ponged back and forth. And the judge basically says, at this point, you got to make a decision. I'm drawing a line. There's no coming back from this. Either you're going to represent yourself or you're not. And he goes through the whole colloquy. Are you sure you want to? Trevor Summers says yes. So he ends up representing himself and cross-examining his ex-wife. What is interesting is they keep saying gentlemen of the jury, meaning this entire jury is made up of men in a case where a man is accused in an estranged relationship of kidnapping and abusing and hurting his wife. And his defense is basically, she's lying. She tries to pull these things. She tries to get money out of me. She tries to get the kids from me. So there are some interesting dynamics there. And it is always interesting because they keep messing up. We always in our head as lawyers just say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I have had a all-female jury before where I've had to just say women of the jury or ladies of the jury or whatever. And it is very awkward to do. Secondarily, prosecuting a case against a pro se criminal defendant is very, very difficult. And you have to be very careful. You don't want to steamroll them. You don't want to break rules that you know are wrong just because you assume they are not going to object. And I'm a little worried about how this prosecutor has been going since the defendant has taken over the case, asking inadmissible questions, in my opinion, objecting a ton to things I don't think she should object to, and the judge is sustaining them. And I disagree with a couple of them. We can get into the specifics if you guys want to. And then she's also asking directed questions on, or I should say leading questions on direct examination, and improperly bolstering certain witnesses with their other statements. And so it's very difficult to toe that line, right? Especially when you want to make sure you want to put a bad guy away. So I understand that, and I've done that before, but it can be very, very difficult and delicate. I thought it was very interesting. The defense lawyer actually did the opening statement, and he basically said there's not enough evidence for attempted murder, grand theft, kidnapping. The child neglect, I'll leave to you to decide, is what he said to the jury. It's like, sir, you're leaving all of this to the jury to decide, but I guess they're kind of waving the white flag with child neglect that it was a bad idea. So during direct examination, the wife goes into excruciating detail of what happened and how she was thrown around and there was a struggle and she was tied up first with, string and Christmas lights and scarves and all over the place. And, they went to McDonald's and they went to a Citgo and they parked in a parking lot and she had to pee in a McDonald's cup, and a horrifying, horrible chain of events that she described and that nobody should ever have to go through. It was miserable. She was pretty composed on the stand. I saw some comments saying she seems cold. It doesn't seem like she cares. So there's been some comments like that from other people watching. And then he cross-examined her. And if you remember back very early on, I know Brianna was around and a couple others in the chat that I see, Bodie was around, from Ronnie O'Neill, who also represented himself and cross-examined his alleged victim, his son, also a family member. And it was brutal. Okay. This was similar but different. It definitely did not feel as gut-wrenching as Ronnie O'Neill with his son. I felt like Trevor Summers has been, now, twisted things, can happen in people's heads. And I'm not saying this is good or right or anything, because anybody that represents himself and gets himself in this situation, bad stuff has to happen. But he has seemed pretty cool, calm, and collected, and pretty professional. And I actually think he's doing a pretty good job of pointing out inconsistencies. Like you said, you were in the back seat, but this street camera picks you up in the front seat. You said you were tied up at Walgreens. You actually, the witness said you had your hand like this, and she saw you through the window, the witness for the prosecution. Yes, there are a ton of details that I, didn't necessarily put in there. He went to a Walgreens. The big ticket to me is went to a Walgreens. Somebody saw her get out of the car and try to run, and he went and grabbed her, threw her in the car, and left. That's the most damning evidence against him, in my opinion. And then at the end, yes, he did cut his own throat, and it was an attempted suicide, I guess, that didn't end up working because they did save him. But as far as how he's handling the case, he is picking apart certain inaccuracies or inconsistencies. He is pointing out that certain things don't make sense, how she explained them. He's getting her more riled up than him, and she's getting very angry. And, I think he's hitting some points. However, when you come down to it, his theory makes no sense as to why he would take her, throw her in the car, and leave for 3 days and leave the kids. If you were like going on a getaway together or trying to rekindle something or, that type of stuff, to me, really doesn't make any sense, and he starts to lose it there. We're able to watch the trial on YouTube. If you just type in Trevor Summers trial, there are multiple channels kind of streaming it. So none of that really makes sense. On her side, it doesn't really make sense that they were intimate before he tied her up when he got to the house, after he tied her up at the house, and they, had kind of a kinky relationship, I guess, and he tried to bring that out a little bit. There were objections to relevance that were sustained on that, which I totally disagree with. I think it's absolutely relevant if that's the theory of his case. That, listen, people are into what they're into. The suffocation to me is a well-known thing. Tying each other up is a well-known thing. Filming each other is a well-known thing. Not that I'm not condoning it morally or anything on this channel. I'm just saying, I think legally speaking, it's a plausible explanation to a lot of what went on. And if they did have that kind of relationship, then I think that's should be something the jury should be able to consider. And it's very difficult, obviously. I know people are going to get mad in the chat that, I'm not just saying, burn this guy, or, he doesn't deserve a defense and things like that. That's how people are always going to feel towards criminal defense lawyers, which I understand. But in this case, he actually is making some valid points, poking some valid holes. He has done his research. He has found some inconsistencies, and he does have, so far from what I've seen, kind of an idea of where he wants this theory and trial to go. So that I think is really important. Let's see here. He pointed out how she has some foggy memories of certain things, but she was giving the prosecutor details. That's something criminal defense lawyers do all the time. How she said there was blood all over the seats, but then we have pictures. There isn't any blood. Then she said she wiped it up with wet wipes. And there are all sorts of inconsistencies really that he pointed out that I think makes sense so far. It is very strange to hear. He talked about himself in the third person a lot when he was cross-examining his ex-wife. He was very nice to his children. They didn't seem to, it seemed like, I almost said normal, as normal as it could be if you're cross-examining your children when you're on trial for something like this. And it's something that is so unusual, and we've seen twice in the last couple of years just in Tampa Bay, where the defendant is cross-examining his alleged victims. So I've watched a lot of the trial. I've watched all of the, wife and kids testimonies, opening statements, things like that. So I really want to get to as many of your questions as I can. I'm on my own today. Rachel's on vacation, so I'm going to get to as many as I can. If I don't hit every question, I'm sorry. I've got about 15 minutes here for questions, and for you guys to let me know if you want me to continue talking about this case. Psychology Noir with Dr. Lund. This process only reinforces his power over her and her trauma. As a therapist, this re-traumatizing of a victim is appalling, very similar to Bundy's defense of himself and questioning his victims. So here's what I'll say, because I'm the criminal defense lawyer. You're the therapist. I agree with you, and I appreciate your comment. And I would never want to traumatize somebody or re-traumatize somebody. But I think you would agree with me in your work. You've probably come across this, and I'm not saying that at all about the victim in this case. But there are such things as wrongful allegations, as allegations that turn out to not be true. And a lot of times that's fleshed out in a court of law or in a litigation process. And so if they do not have to be subject to cross-examination, sometimes the truth never comes out. So it is difficult to talk about. I understand it's difficult to conceptualize. We do want to believe victims and fight for victims. That's what I do. I fight for victims and for justice every day for my clients. So I always do want to believe them. But I think this process is important. And sometimes if you feel like nobody cares about your case like you do, I disagree with that. They say anybody who represents himself is a fool for a client, and I stand by that, and I agree with that. But if you get to that point where Trevor Summers is, where he thinks he's the only one that actually believes his innocence and he's better off cross-examining it himself, these witnesses himself, then we want to live in a country that does that. Because I don't want to be disrespectful in this, but I like turning it around on somebody else, saying if somebody accused you of something that you know that you didn't do, and we didn't have a process like this, and we just believed the alleged victim and didn't give you an opportunity to cross-examine or put on a case, I don't think you would feel like that was true. It puts me at peace and at ease and at comfort most of the time, at least, when a defendant has this opportunity and they lose and a jury rules against them, then at least we can feel confident that he was able to put on his case, cross-examine these witnesses, cross-examine these alleged victims, and the jury believed them. And so that, feels like a better outcome than if we just didn't even give them the opportunity to. That's kind of how I see it. Melanie, who could be mad at you? Somehow people do it, and I don't think it's that hard. It's Joe McKinley. Why is it allowed to question the alleged victim? Is it not further abuse for something heinous? Became a member yesterday. Been watching 2 months, though. Love it. Thank you for all you do. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for joining, and it'll be fun later. I saw somebody mad that it's a members only chat for the top 10 TV shows. It's not going to be members only comment. You can still comment on it. You can still do the poll stuff, but it's just a perk for the membership. We provide perks here and there, and it's not any legal case or legal breakdown or teaching about the legal system. I try to provide that to the whole channel, subscribers, people that don't subscribe. 50% of the people that watch aren't subscribed. It's not like I'm kicking them out of videos or anything like that. But sometimes I like to provide a little extra perks for the members for supporting the channel and just having fun. So sorry, I don't mean to offend anybody, and I hope nobody's offended by that. But if you are, I understand. And that's your prerogative to disagree with that. But as far as this question goes, it is legal. It is hard, right? And I'll tell you what's even, in the same vein as this is when you get injured in an accident or have a wrongful death case, and you file a lawsuit to get compensation for that, and to get justice for that. They are allowed to go through basically all of your medical records for all time to try to find something that's relevant. They are allowed to ask you questions about past relationships, about past bad things that have happened to you, about divorce settlements you may have come through, about if you've gone bankrupt before, if you've lost a house, if you've done all of this stuff, had trouble with your kids, anybody ever accused you of anything. They get to dig into your life like that because somebody T-boned you at a red light. And to me, that's not fair. Just like a crime being committed against you and you have to testify about it. It's not fair. But we live in a civilized society where it's not just about one person and what's fair and right and best for one person, but for everybody in society. And while it would feel more fair and right for you to not have to do anything to get justice if something happens to you, it wouldn't be fair to the other person that you're accusing. So we balance that. We balance the fundamental fairness when we come up with our laws and what's allowed and what's not allowed. And he would not be allowed to scream at her and put hands on her. And they are absolutely in control of his temperament in this trial while he's cross-examining his ex-wife, his kids, and they would throw him out of the courtroom. And to me, it is something that is fundamental and fair and something we need in our system, even though it is very difficult to understand and very difficult to process, as we don't want to put people through more difficulty. So that's about as good as I can answer that question. A lot of people saying that, yes, they want me to follow this case. So I will. And let me get to some more questions here. Serial killer. I thought a court-appointed lawyer was a public defender. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And you can always, usually they call him the public defender. And if it's a court-appointed lawyer, it's a private lawyer on the court-appointed list. Two different things technically, but it doesn't make that big of a difference. Yes, she did not look at him. It did look weird, but it makes sense that she wouldn't want to look at him. More inconsistencies, Rita said today. Brianna thinks he's going to go down for the kidnapping because it just, his theory of the case really doesn't make a lot of sense, in my opinion. When you get down to the facts that even he's agreeing with, because he's agreeing with a lot of the evidence and a lot of the facts. And to me, Donna, I would say her side is more believable. The question is, does it rise to the level of beyond a reasonable doubt? And that, to me, is what we'll discuss on the channel. Is I absolutely think her, in a civil case, she wins. Greater weight of the evidence, which is just 50.1%, she wins. But this is beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's, I think, why he's pointing out these inconsistencies. Somebody, I just scrolled past, do you have the right to face your accuser? Yes. The confrontation clause in the Constitution allows you to confront your accuser. Pro se defendant Azam is someone who represents themselves and gets rid of any counsel. He's gone through 5 lawyers in 5 years. Thank you, Rita Castillo, for the super sticker. Mayath Mouse, I would love to know how his lawyers managed to get him an all-male jury. Any woman who would have been on the jury would tear this dude to shreds. I don't disagree with you, and I also think it's interesting. I think it's an all-female prosecutorial team, right? I mean, it's very interesting how that's possible. I've never had an all-male jury ever. Rich Cat. So it's interesting you say this. Wouldn't it make more sense to allow only a virtual cross, Zoom or indirect through computer, or would that still be stressful for the victim? A, it would still be stressful for the victim. B, there's been some case law that does not jive with the confrontation clause. You have to be able to look them in the eye, see their facial expressions. Now, there is some difference with minors, but for the most part, people and criminal defendants have been successful in saying that's not good enough. We have to actually see how they're acting, who they're looking at. Is anybody else in the room handing them stuff, especially when you're dealing with something serious? So that actually, it's an interesting point. And we've talked about it in legal circles, and people have kind of landed on the side that is not enough to satisfy the confrontation clause. So Lois, I heard them kind of talk about federal issues he has going on. It seems like there was a motion in limine in that. Offshore accounts, and he knows people that could make him disappear on a boat into international waters. I'm not positive if he has federal charges. I don't think they are specifically exactly the same as these charges stemming from March 11th to the 13th. Azam. So in America, because Azam is not from America, for any of those of you that don't recognize her name, she's a member of the page and asks a lot of questions, and we love Azam. In America, you can represent yourself. That is a Sixth Amendment right, that you can get rid of any other counsel. And when the cards are down and when the rubber meets the road, you're the only one you trust for your case. We all advise against it in the legal system, but that is technically a right that we all have as Americans, and he's exercising that right, and he's representing himself. LA, thank you. And yes, I mean, we had a lot of people ask about this. I know there are some other videos going on right now, so not a ton of people maybe were able to make this, but you guys let me know if you want to hear more about it. I'll talk more about it because it is here in my backyard and courtrooms I've tried cases in. Yes, Lady Lalali said separate charges, wire fraud, bank fraud. Seems like the guy's in a world of trouble. If you're new to the channel just because of this case, take a second and subscribe because we hit a lot of these cases around the country, and I am a trial lawyer in Florida. So if you're specifically interested in the Tampa Bay area or Florida cases, there seems to be a lot of them. I don't know why. I am hitting as many of them as I possibly can. All right. So 2 or 3 more minutes here, but I do want to thank everybody for jumping on last minute. Check back in at 2 o'clock Eastern time, which is about an hour and a half. We're going to do a lighthearted, fun video. I mean, this week we've talked about Parkland. We've talked about this case. We've talked about Kobe Bryant's case. Been a heavy week of videos, so it's going to be kind of nice to relax at 2 o'clock, blow off some steam, and just talk about some legal TV shows. And you guys can tell me how horrible my top 10 list is and what TV shows I missed and how could I possibly miss them. And as always, just like in the legal movies top 10, I got some really good recommendations that I went and watched, and I actually did enjoy a lot of them. So make sure you come there with some more legal TV show recommendations. Rich Cat says, I have a whole list of cases I wish you'd break down over the years. I only have so much time, so I'm trying to hit as many as I can. Allie says, I always think it's interesting when someone is pro se. It is definitely interesting. It's difficult. It's hard on the judge. It's hard on the prosecutor. It's hard on the witnesses. It's hard on the people in the courtroom. It's hard on everybody. But it's something we got to deal with. We have to be delicate. We can't make the same objections. I always try to be softer in the courtroom. I say always. I've tried one case, 2-day trial against a pro se criminal defendant, and we did win, but it was hard. And it's funny because this guy, the reason that we put 2 prosecutors on this case, me and another prosecutor, is because this pro se defendant that I tried a case against had already tried a different criminal case pro se and won. Juries sometimes feel bad for people representing themselves. So he had already won the case. So that's why we had to put the full force on him for the second trial. And we did end up winning the second trial on different charges. Jesse James, isn't him cross-examining his victim only going to hurt his case, cringing the jury? Absolutely. It could sink his case or it could make it. It all depends on what those 6 men on the jury think. And to me, it could go either way. He did not, to me, it's never great when you have to cross-examine your abuse victim, obviously. But to me, I think he did about as good of a job as you could have. Honestly, I really think he was calm. He didn't fight with her. He got his points across on what he wanted to say. He actually said and what she said and how it's not necessarily true and things like that. I think he did a good job getting that across. I think he pointed out a lot of inconsistencies. And he got her to admit some bad facts for them, like the intercourse that they had before and after, and how she was worried he reversed his vasectomy and was trying to get her pregnant. And she said no at first, but then she agreed that she was getting birth control and she was worried about a Plan B pill. I think I can't remember which one it was, but so again, just some inconsistencies in her answers to him. So he did do a good job with that. Now, does that mean he's not guilty? No, not at all. I'm not saying that means he's not guilty. I just think he did do a pretty decent job cross-examining her in an impossible situation. No, the jury's not going to know that he hired so many lawyers, but the jury knows he started with a lawyer and now he doesn't have a lawyer anymore. The lawyer's sitting in the back row. So the jury is going to know that. Leah is a new member. Leah, hopefully you're going to check back at 2 o'clock. CC, yes, I did cut my hair, and I felt bad for him. I really felt bad for the kids. I mean, this whole situation seems like it was really brutal on the kids, how they had to be split up and they sleep in the mom's bed with them at the houses, and they just I feel like they've been traumatized for years in this couple's relationship, and now they're still being dragged through court, and it just is, it's horrible. It's horrible to see, and that to me is the worst part about this, personally. Brianna, I agree with you. I think Ronnie O'Neal did come across likable, but I mean, I think he was not nearly as technically sound as Trevor Summers, but I think he was actually more likable personally, except for his opening and closing. That was not very likable in my opinion. But when he was questioning the witnesses and stuff and on the camera and to the judge, I do think he was very likable. Do I think the inconsistencies are enough for reasonable doubt? Living my best life said, I don't know yet. But I think it's a start. I definitely don't think they're falling on deaf ears or totally don't matter. I wouldn't say that. But I wouldn't say he's won the case and provided reasonable doubt yet either. I think it's open. I would lean towards a conviction. I'd probably be 75-25% towards a conviction for kidnapping, for sure. I don't know about grand theft because he even asked her, "Did you say I couldn't take the car? You said I could take the keys. I'm the one who always drove." But the fact that she's saying it was all under undue distress because he was threatening her, I think that's where either they could just convict him across the board. But I think a split verdict would be something like child neglect and kidnapping, but not grand theft and attempted murder, something like that. Wilkinson, sorry you missed out. Hopefully you can check it out and get in the comments and then join us back in an hour and a half. We'll be back for another live. Yes, Demon, I did see that. It was cringy, but I think that her answers were, at least somebody could think like that. That's a little bit strange to me. I think that it would go in the order that it went. But yeah. So, all right, we will talk more about this case in the future. Thank you to everybody that jumped on here. Hit that like button on your way out and share the video for anybody else that's interested in this case. We will keep talking about it. We'll talk about it when the verdict comes down and what you all think and what we think of how he did the rest of the case. But thanks for jumping in. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for subscribing and commenting and everything you do for the channel. It makes it a lot of fun. So I appreciate you all. Until the next one.